From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
I believe waterboarding is illegal. I believe it's prohibited under the Convention Against Torture and the Geneva Conventions. But I don't believe that Judge Mukasey should be denied confirmation for failing to provide an absolute answer on this one subject.
For the Senate to make a bold declaration about torture and waterboarding by rejecting Judge Mukasey is appealing. But to defeat him would abandon the hope of instituting many of the reforms called for by our investigation.
Two Democratic senators, Chuck Schumer and Dianne Feinstein. Their votes for Michael Mukasey meant the Democratic-led Judiciary Committee has recommended his confirmation as Attorney General to the full Senate. We'll play excerpts of the committee hearing, then Rapture Rescue 9/11. Disaster response for the chosen. We'll speak with journalist and author Naomi Klein about disaster capitalism, from the wildfires in California to the floods in Mexico. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The U.S. occupation of Iraq has reached another grim milestone. On Tuesday, the Pentagon confirmed 2007 has become the deadliest year for U.S. troops in Iraq since the invasion 4 years ago. 6 U.S. service members were killed Monday, bringing this year's toll to 853. Meanwhile, the Associated Press is reporting the Pentagon is secretly reviewing plans to ease enlistment standards to make up for a recruiting shortfall. The number of recruits seeking waivers for criminal behavior rose 3% last year to nearly 1/5 of all prospective service members. 2/3 of the waivers were approved. The United Nations has issued a new warning over the role of private military firms in Iraq and Afghanistan in a report set for release today. The UN calls the reliance on private companies, quote, new modalities of mercenarism. The report says private guards are akin to irregular combatants. The private military industry has come under unprecedented scrutiny following the September killing of 17 Iraqis by Blackwater guards. The UN panel says more countries should sign on to the International Convention against the recruitment, use, financing, and training of mercenaries. Only 30 governments have ratified so far. In Afghanistan, at least 60 people have been killed and 50 injured in a suicide bombing targeting Afghan lawmakers. The dead include 6 parliamentarians as well as school children and senior citizens. It was the worst suicide bombing in Afghanistan since the U.S. invasion in 2001. The Taliban's denying responsibility, but it's the lone group known for suicide attacks inside Afghanistan. In Pakistan, police are vowing to shut down a planned rally against President General Pervez Musharraf's imposition of state of emergency. Former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto says she'll lead the protests south of Islamabad today. Bhutto returned to Pakistan Tuesday. She immediately denied charges of talks with Musharraf over a power-sharing deal.
If you are hearing that a meeting is about to take place, no such meeting is scheduled. If you are reading reports that I was consulted, no such consultation took place.
Lawyers continued a third day of demonstrations today, although in smaller numbers. Thousands of people have been detained in the crackdown. The Senate Judiciary Committee has approved the nomination of Michael Mukasey as Attorney General. Democratic Senators Chuck Schumer of New York and Dianne Feinstein of California joined all 9 Republicans on the panel in backing Mukasey. 8 Democrats voted against. Mukasey's confirmation was initially in doubt after he refused to condemn waterboarding as a form of torture. His nomination is expected to go to the Senate floor by next week, where his confirmation is virtually assured. We'll have more on the Senate vote after headlines. House and Senate negotiators have approved a $459 billion military spending bill. Democrats rejected an amendment that would have added $70 billion for the Iraq War without restrictions. Senate Appropriations Chair Robert Byrd says Democrats will refuse to provide further blank checks for war funding. But senior Democrats say they still intend to provide up to $50 billion for the Iraq War as part of the bill. A U.S. district judge has ruled Iraqi torture victims and their relatives can proceed with a lawsuit against a defense contractor involved in abuse scandals at Abu Ghraib and other U.S. prisons in Iraq. The lawsuit says interrogators with Khaki International practiced torture or mistreatment of Iraqi prisoners. In the same ruling, Judge James Robertson dismissed claims against co-defendant Titan on the grounds the company's guards were under the military's exclusive control. But he said the case against Khaki can go forward because company officials were also involved in the chain of command. Local and gubernatorial elections were held in states around the country Tuesday. In Kentucky, Steve Beshear won an upset victory over incumbent Republican Ernie Fletcher. In Mississippi, Republican Governor Haley Barbour was easily reelected to a second term. In Maryland, Sheila Dixon became the first African-American woman elected mayor of Baltimore. In Texas, Mayor Bill White was reelected to a final two-year term. In Utah, voters overwhelmingly rejected the nation's first statewide voucher program that would have subsidized private schools. With a Republican governor and legislature, Utah's rejection was seen as a major defeat for Republican-backed school voucher proponents. Civil rights leaders gathered in Washington Tuesday to renew calls for a massive march next week on the Justice Department. Leaders, including the Reverend Al Sharpton and Martin Luther King III, have called the rally to protest what they call the government's failure to prosecute hate crimes. The march plans follow newly disclosed details of Bush administration's role in installing a Republican majority on the nation's top racism and discrimination panel. According to the Boston Globe, President Bush maneuvered to ensure the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights was composed of a Republican majority. The commission has long been staffed equally with members of both major political parties. To skirt the practice, President Bush appointed 2 Republican commissioners who then promptly changed their affiliations to independents. After the changes, the agency canceled a slew of planned evaluations supported by civil groups. These included assessing the budget for civil rights enforcement, financial aid to minorities, and whether inaccurate census collection has deprived non-white areas of entitled federal spending. Instead, the Commission's output has included reports criticizing school integration and affirmative action in school admissions and small business incentives. 6 Nicaraguan farm workers have been awarded more than $3 million in damages for being rendered sterile from pesticide spraying by the U.S. company Dole Food. Dole continued to spray the pesticide DBCP despite repeated warnings over its health risks. The judgment marks the first time foreign farm workers have won a case against Dole in a U.S. court. The punitive damages will be on hold while Dole appeals. Dole is expected to face several more lawsuits for pesticide use abroad. 2 top officials with the internet giant Yahoo were called before Congress on Tuesday to testify on their role in the jailing of a Chinese journalist. Chertow was sentenced to 10 years after Yahoo passed on his email and internet protocol address to Chinese officials. Speaking before the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Yahoo CEO Jerry Yang and General Counsel Michael Callahan defended Yahoo's role. Chertow's mother was sitting in the room. At the urging of Congressmember Tom Lantos, Yang and Callahan bowed their heads to her in apology. Lantos told the pair, quote, "While technologically and financially you are giants, morally you are pygmies," he said. In privatization news, new figures show electricity prices have risen far higher in states adopting market competition than in those using traditional government rates. According to the group Power in the Public Interest, customers in privatized areas paid over $7 billion more than customers in government-regulated areas. Since 1999, prices in deregulated markets tripled over regulated ones. In Bolivia, President Evo Morales joined with thousands of elderly citizens to march for a proposed government stipend to Bolivians over the age of 60. Morales wants to steer funds from an energy tax to give seniors a monthly sum equal to $310.
¿De dónde y con qué plata se pagaba el bono?